Well, folks, leave it to Uncle Donald to spice things up. The man loves a good Twitter rant, a juicy burger, and apparently meddling in other countries' business. This time, he set his sights on South Africa's land reform program, and let me tell you, it's causing quite a stir. So what's all the fuss about? South Africa decided it's high time to address the whole who owns the land issue. See, after centuries of colonialism and apartheid, the distribution is a tad uneven. We're talking a small percentage of the population, mostly white folks, sitting on a whole lot of land. The rest? Not so much. Naturally, this didn't sit well with everyone. South Africa's government, led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, decided to do something about it. Enter the land expropriation law. Now I know what you're thinking. Expropriation? Sounds scary. But hold your horses. In a nutshell, the law allows the government to take back land under certain conditions, like if it's not being used, if the owner's planning on becoming a space tourist and not coming back, or if it's posing a bigger threat to society than a pack of baboons on payday. The goal? To right some historical wrongs and give everyone a fair shot. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, tell that to Uncle Donald. Now let's rewind a bit. Imagine South Africa as a giant cake, a delicious rainbow-sprinkled cake, but here's the catch. Only a tiny slice of that cake, let's say about 7%, is being enjoyed by a small group of people. The rest? They're just staring at their empty plates, wondering if they'll ever get a taste. That, my friends, is a simplified and tastier version of South Africa's land ownership situation. For centuries, black South Africans were systematically denied the right to own land. It was theirs, they lived there, but nope, not allowed. It's like going to a braai and being told you can't have any Boer-Wars. Unthinkable. Fast forward to 1994. Apartheid ends, Nelson Mandela becomes president, and everyone's all about rainbows and forgiveness. But the land issue? Still a giant elephant in the room, or should I say a rhino on the savannah. The new government promised to address it, but progress has been slow, like a tortoise trying to outrun a cheetah slow. So in 2025, they decided to step it up a notch with the land expropriation law. The idea? To redistribute land to those who were historically denied it, and to do it in a way that's legal, fair, and just. Now back to Uncle Donald. When he heard about this whole land expropriation thing, he was not impressed. In fact, he was downright fuming, like a kettle boiling over with righteous anger, or maybe just indigestion from all those burgers. He took to Twitter, his favorite platform for international diplomacy, and unleashed a tirade against South Africa. He called the land reform illegal, accused the government of seizing land from white farmers, and basically painted a picture of South Africa descending into chaos and anarchy. But he didn't stop there. Oh no, Uncle Donald likes to go big or go home. He slapped sanctions on South Africa, freezing aid and threatening to pull out of trade deals. It was like watching a toddler throw a tantrum in a grocery store, except the toddler is the leader of the free world, and the grocery store is the global economy. He even went as far as to call for the resettlement of white South African farmers, claiming they were facing persecution and violence. Now, I'm not saying there aren't any issues in South Africa, because there are. But to paint an entire group of people as victims and call for their mass exodus, that's a bit extreme even for Uncle Donald. So, how did the rest of the world react to Uncle Donald's little outburst? Well, let's just say they weren't exactly lining up to give him a high five. In fact, most countries were left scratching their heads, wondering what he was on about. The European Union, usually a staunch ally of the US, expressed concern over Trump's actions, calling them unhelpful and counterproductive. Even China, not exactly known for its love of human rights, threw some shade at the US, with a spokesperson saying, "We believe in respecting the sovereignty of all countries and resolving issues through dialogue and cooperation." Meanwhile, back in South Africa, people were understandably upset. They saw Trump's actions as not only misinformed, but also deeply offensive. It was like he was completely ignoring their history, their struggles, and their efforts to build a more just and equitable society. Even those who weren't exactly thrilled with the land reform law were critical of Trump's intervention. They understood that this was a complex issue with no easy solutions, and that trying to bully South Africa into doing things his way was not going to help anyone. Section 5, A History of Taking It. Now, some folks might say, hold on Trevor, isn't taking land without compensation, well, theft? And on the surface, yeah, it might seem that way. But to understand why South Africa's doing this, we need to delve into the history books, those dusty old things gathering cobwebs in the corner. For centuries, colonialism and apartheid were all about taking land, taking resources, taking rights, you name it. It was like a giant game of Monopoly, except the board was rigged and black South Africans were stuck with Baltic Avenue while the white minority lived it up on Park Place. This systematic dispossession wasn't just unfair, it was downright brutal. Families were uprooted, communities torn apart, and entire cultures decimated. It was trauma on a massive scale, the scars of which are still felt today. So when the South African government talks about expropriation without compensation, they're not talking about some random land grab. They're talking about addressing historical injustices, about trying to level the playing field after centuries of it being tilted against them. Section 6. Trump making America grumpy again and South Africa too. Now let's be honest, folks. Uncle Donald isn't exactly known for his nuanced understanding of complex issues. This is a man who once suggested injecting disinfectant to cure COVID-19, so it's not surprising that his take on South Africa's land reform is about as subtle as a rhinoceros in a china shop. But here's the thing, Trump's actions weren't just misinformed, they were downright dangerous. By spreading misinformation and stoking racial tensions, he was playing with fire, and fire has a nasty habit of burning out of control. His rhetoric also played right into the hands of right-wing groups in both South Africa and the US, groups that have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. These groups seized upon Trump's words as proof of a white genocide in South Africa, using them to justify their own racist agendas. The irony is, Trump's actions probably did more harm than good to the very people he claimed to be protecting. By turning this into an international incident, he made it even harder to find a peaceful and equitable solution to the land issue in South Africa. Section 7, can we all just get along? Spoiler alert, probably not. So, what now? Can the US and South Africa kiss and make up? Well, after that whole public spat, it might take more than a box of chocolates and a bunch of flowers. The Biden administration has tried to mend fences, but the damage is done. Trust has been broken, and it'll take time and effort to rebuild it. Plus, with the land issue still simmering, it's like trying to put out a Veld fire with a water pistol. The international community is watching closely, hoping for a peaceful resolution. But with so much at stake, and emotions running high, it's anyone's guess how this will all play out. One thing's for sure, this isn't just about land, it's about justice, equality, and the legacy of colonialism and apartheid. It's about righting historical wrongs and building a future where everyone has a fair shot. And that, my friends, is a fight worth having, even if it gets messy. Section 8, and the winner is nobody. So, who wins in this whole debacle? Spoiler alert, nobody. Not South Africa, not the US, and certainly not the cause of justice and equality. South Africa's land reform process, already a delicate balancing act, has been thrown into further turmoil. The economy is suffering, investors are spooked, and social divisions are widening. It's like someone threw a Molotov cocktail into a room full of highly flammable hairspray. The US, on the other hand, has lost credibility on the world stage. Trump's actions have alienated allies, emboldened adversaries, and made America look like a bully throwing its weight around. Not exactly the image of a global leader. And as for the issue of land ownership in South Africa, well, it's still as complex and contentious as ever. There are no easy answers, no quick fixes. It'll take dialogue, compromise, and a willingness to confront the ghosts of the past. Section 9. In conclusion, everything's going to be interesting. So there you have it, folks. The US and South Africa, once partners in democracy, are now locked in a bitter dispute over land, history, and the legacy of colonialism. It's a messy situation with no easy solutions. Will they be able to patch things up? Will South Africa find a way to address its land inequalities without further dividing the nation? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, this is a story that's far from over. So buckle up, grab some biltong, and get ready for the long haul. It's going to be a bumpy ride.